効果を捧げればパンを得られる。税を捧げれば権利を得られる。労働を捧げれば報酬を得られる。なら一体何を捧げればこの世のすべてを知れる。
What would you give for your ambitions? That is the question Orb dares to ask. Orb, or The Movements of the Earth, is a manga written by Woto, who, unfortunately, I'm unfamiliar with their work, and was animated by Studio Madhouse, the same studio that brought out some of these anime. So you can tell I was excited when I saw they had a new project between late last year and early this year. The anime is set in Poland around the early 15th century or so, where at the time they believed in this little thing called geocentrism. I'm about to start talking about real astronomy concepts, so here's your Subway Surfers gameplay video to, keep attention. To put it simply, right, geocentrism is the belief that everything in the universe, the stars, the sun, the moon, the planets, all revolved around the Earth. It was basically space narcissism. Anyways, the church at the time, which held a lot of power, believed in this theory because it aligned with their doctrine, which stated that the Earth was the center of the universe. So, by extension, it was also the lowest point in the universe because, that makes sense. And it being the lowest point is basically the bottom of the barrel of the universe, the place where all greed, corruption, and evil resides. And whoever who lived a humble, modest life under the church could ascend past this filthy plane and go to heaven, but anyone who dared go against the church's teachings was branded a heretic bound for hell, and they were re-educated. Orb, on the Movements of the Earth, is the story of these so-called heretics. The story of Orb focuses on 5 main characters: Rafal, Oxy, Draka, and Nowak, each of them having a great role to play involving heliocentrism, the greatest of those alternate teachings frowned upon by the church. Heliocentrism is the astronomical concept that we all believe in right now, I hope, that the sun is the center of our solar system and all our planets revolve around it. You know it. Looking at all the characters, first we have Rafal. He was a young boy born an orphan with all the disadvantages you'd imagine that comes with being one. He was later taken in by this man, Potocki, and he planned on living the perfect life by living rationally. Like, he even says it himself.
僕の心情は合理的に生きるだ。愛とかに代表される無意な感情や無駄な欲望に惑わされず、合理的な選択をすれば、この世は快適に過ごせる。
It's a depressing philosophy, I know, but it's one he abides by, and to be fair, it did get him social cred and a ticket to uni, so who am I to judge? His perfect plan is tested though, when he is asked to give up the one thing he finds joy in, astronomy. And funny enough, he is ready to give it all up before he meets a heretic who was also ready to give everything up for his beliefs. Enter Hubert. Hubert represented everything Rafal was not, and unfortunately his convictions are what led him to his untimely demise. That conviction is what inspired Rafal to pick up heliocentrism. It's what inspired him to finally do something irrational and chase what he loved. And ultimately, it is what led to him being initially imprisoned. Oxy. Oxy was an assassin. He was raised religious, like most, and was taught that Earth was the lowest possible point in the universe. Since then, he's felt this inferiority complex towards the heavens. He couldn't even look to the sky despite loving stargazing because the stars now resembled eyeballs who looked down on him. He hated the world we lived in because it was full of evil, corruption, greed, sin. In fact, he didn't even believe it was right to like this world. Through his partner, Gras, the heretic they met, and his eventual master, Badeni, and all their shared belief in heliocentrism, he is able to find hope in this world again. Draka. While Oxy was raised religious, Draka practically grew up an atheist, relying on nothing but her wits to make money. So much money, in fact, that she wouldn't have to fear death anymore. Not in some selfish capitalist way, but in the way of a young girl who lost her dad, who was in pursuit of money to take care of their needs. So it became trauma for her. Her goal is out of fear. But after a lot of stuff you need to watch the anime to know, she meets the Heretic Liberation Front and their leader especially, Yolenta. She inherits Yolenta's conviction after her death, and throughout the show slowly changes to a person who, by the end, is ready to accept death. Through heliocentrism, each of them were able to find true happiness and embark on this once-in-a-lifetime journey of self-discovery, and all's well that ends well. Right? I ask again, what would you give for your ambitions? Rafal killed himself. Oxy is captured and hanged. Draka bleeds to death from a stab wound. These people gave everything. Rafal had a bright future in theology. Oxy would have continued living a stable life in the Night's Watch, and Draka would have probably made a lot more money doing her textile business. But now, just because of a scientific theory, not only did these three people lose their lives, but they have nothing to show for it in the end. They didn't leave their mark, they have no statuses, no names in any textbooks, no statues to commemorate them, nothing. And even the show confirms this fact. So now I ask you, did it all matter? And would it be crazy to say yes? It all mattered not because the world remembered, but because they did. One of the biggest themes in Orb is inspiration. Heliocentrism itself is just a theory. It's the inspiration behind it that led to all our protagonists finding themselves. Heck, there wasn't a character in Orb who believed in heliocentrism, main or supporting, who didn't die with hope in their eyes or a smile on their face. Because even though these people were hellbound, they were happy. And this inspiration was passed down from person to person for decades through heliocentrism. These people weren't even trying to be great for others, they were trying to be good for themselves. To say it didn't matter is to say their lives didn't matter. It's the same as asking why they were even heretics in the first place. This is Nowak. He, throughout the decades, witnessed it all. Because he is the man who killed them all. He is an inquisitor of the church. Remember that thing I talked about at the beginning of the video, the re-education? Wait, did I talk about that? Yeah, he is responsible for correcting and re-educating heretics. So basically torturing them till they give up their ideals, or killing them if it's their second offense of heresy. He was the one that captured Rafal and was with him in the cell when he killed himself. He was the one to capture, torture, and ultimately hang Oxy and Badeni. And he was the one to stab Draka, causing her to bleed to death. Looking at all this, we can easily say he's the antagonist of the show. Nowak has always been someone who's hated heliocentrism because it had the opposite effect on him as it did others. Where others gained hope from it, Nowak only gained fear. See, Nowak is a simple man. He believes in God and the Christian faith. He also believes anyone who lives a modest, quiet life will eventually enter heaven, and any other dangerous ideologies should be exterminated before they could put him or his loved ones, especially his loved ones, in danger. That dangerous ideology being heliocentrism. He believes the change to be radical and that it goes against everything he believes in because, to be honest, it kinda does put some parts of his faith into question because if the earth revolves around the sun, it's not the lowest point, it's not the place for sinners. What are we talking about? If Rafal, Draka, and Oxy were elements of change, Nowak is an element of stagnation. He believes in the old ways of doing things and at the time the current ways of doing things and doesn't believe that any change should be enacted on them. And to an extent, I can't blame him because oddly enough, Nowak is kind of a tragic character. As much as Orb is a show about inspiration and hope, it's also a show about how those things help to shape one's conviction. Nowak believed in the old doctrine as much and as hopefully as the others did in heliocentrism. So this whole time he did everything he did thinking he was the good guy. When he captured Rafal initially, it was with a promise to his caretaker that he would get let off easy if Rafal just recanted. And honestly, that was all he wanted. He just wanted this boy to take back these ideologies and go back to living his normal life because he did not want it to get to torture. He captures Badeni and Oxy, and although he tortures them, well, he touches just Oxy, he did that because they brought that dangerous theory so close to his daughter Yolenta. Yes, the eventual leader of the Heretic Liberation Front Yolenta, the one person he was trying to protect when she was a kid. And even in Draka's case, he burns down the church to frame her and still proceeds to stab her out of desperation because his whole world was shattering. Look, I'm not saying Nowak is a good person. The man's a former mercenary for Pete's sake. But I'm just saying, I can understand the place in which a lot of his actions come from. And sure, he often children of heretics sometimes, but for the greater good. Okay, so imagine you were born and raised with a particular belief. You studied cosmology, which basically affirmed those beliefs to you. Then you are hired by a bishop to stop the spread of some dangerous ideas, even labeling believers of it as heretics and some as even possessed. You take the job, right, and turn your life around only to meet 1. A 12-year-old heretic who took his own life for his beliefs. 2. An assassin who was ready to die for a silly theory and brought that theory towards your daughter, who gets branded as a heretic and is quote-unquote killed. 3. A textile merchant who was looking for support for the theory from the church and almost had it. And you are being told by another bishop that the past few decades of your life have basically been mercenary work because heliocentrism is not heresy. Because what actually happened was somewhere in the world there was an authority on cosmology who had a very strict view on it, and the people who were unlucky enough to study heliocentrism under them were branded as heretics. That is where the myth of heliocentrism being heresy came from. The bishop that hired Nowak didn't do it to protect the faithful or for some crusade. He did it to protect his own strict view of cosmology. That is why he hired a former mercenary to do it. That is why he contracted that work, the dirty work of the operation, out to Nowak. Throughout this whole show, the only person who has been actually suppressing heliocentrism was Nowak. No other mercenaries were hired. No other people were killed for it. All of his records were burnt and classified because Nowak is the actual antagonist of the show, despite not wanting to be. All records of all of Nowak's executions were classified because if they were released to other church members or to the public, it wouldn't make sense because heliocentrism isn't actually heresy. And he was given a false title of Inquisitor, so he wouldn't feel like he was still a mercenary. This is why Nowak is a tragic character. Because after all these years, he never left mercenary work. Now, here he is, bleeding out in the church he set fire to, symbolizing the ideals he held on to so dearly for so long, burning away, as he's hallucinating the young boy he saw take his own life so many years ago. And on speaking to the boy, Nowak realizes,
二人の悪役だったんだ。
and as he's holding the appendage of his dead daughter, he looks to the sky and does the unspeakable. He prays for a so-called heretic. And now he dies, leaving nothing and no one behind, because unlike inspiration, unlike change, unlike hope, you can't pass up stagnation. He was so against change up until the very end, and now it's too late. Moving on, another character I neglected to mention is Rafal. Again, I can already hear you scratching your heads, confused, asking, but you said Rafal killed himself. Well, yeah, he did. Okay, so basically, he's an unknown character, but he was presented as Rafal for reasons that I want to get into. So, stay with me now. Jingle, jingle. Okay, so I can't introduce this Rafal without introducing his accompanying character, Albert, the fourth and final protagonist of Orb. I neglected to mention him because he doesn't really play the same role as the others. He's against the pursuit of knowledge, and he actually hates it and feels we'd be better without it. But his opinion does change after speaking with a priest about it and recounting his whole story to how he got that opinion in the first place. So let's rewind a bit. As a kid, Albert was the most curious of children, as you know, kids usually are, and his father actually encouraged his curiosity, even went as far as getting him a tutor, which yeah, but his dad also taught him to doubt his convictions, because the pursuit of knowledge can grow beyond control. So if his path doesn't serve humanity, he should abandon it. And you know, knowledge for knowledge's sake is crazy type shit. But that's not what his tutor tells him. He tells him the opposite actually. He encourages Albert's curiosity. He argues that philosophy is built on wonder, and our bodies naturally respond to the beauty of the universe, to the point where our spirit compels us towards that beauty, and that is the point where we stop to start to question. If the universe is God's creation, then we are noble in our pursuit to understand it. He tells Albert he should be willing to pay any price for knowledge, and knowledge for knowledge's sake is not a waste. Well, Rafal was telling the truth when he said that, because he really was willing to pay any price to gain knowledge, to gain the truth, even if that price was a life. If you haven't gotten it yet, this Rafal is meant to mirror our Rafal. They're supposed to be different ends of the spectrum, one willing to sacrifice his own life and the other willing to take a life. It's also meant to mirror Albert's father, with one having insane doubt for knowledge and the other one having an insane thirst for it. The priest challenges Albert's totality on the subject. He says humans aren't God, neither are they beast. Doubt and conviction can exist together, and one who never doubts his convictions is one who lives to regret them, as Yolenta lived to do. Albert steps out of the church with a new opinion and outlook. He decides he's not going to follow his father's path of doubt, neither is he going to follow his tutor's path of conviction. He's going to forge his own path with a combination of the two, and with that he finally does something he hasn't been able to do in years. Albert looks towards the night sky. At the end, they are all looking towards the sky, towards the heavens. Rafal couldn't do it initially because it painfully reminded him of what he had to give up, astronomy. Oxy couldn't do it because of his religious inferiority complex and belief of Earth being the lowest point. Draka couldn't do it because of the painful reminder of her father's death because he died in the morning. And Albert couldn't do it because he is constantly reminded of how his pursuit of knowledge killed his father. But the difference between Albert and the rest is he's not knocking on death's door with this one. He enrolls into university and decides to study astronomy. On the way back, he overhears someone talking about a book on heliocentrism. That book being the last piece of existing work that is the culmination of everything Rafal through Draka have done. And where is the book? It never got published. A letter was just sent to inform the owner of a house that once belonged to Potocki that he'd get 10% when the book was published. That passing idea was enough. It served as the last faint passing of the torch, the last inspiration given to Albert, who began teaching in the university 20 years later. And one of his students? Copernicus. Though these people were lost to the annals of history, they still helped shape it, and their contribution is one thing at least that won't be forgotten. But despite everything, no matter what happened, they helped shape the era at least. Oh yeah, and evil Rafal was beaten to death. I decided to make this video because the topic of inspiration and lack thereof is a deeply personal one. Nowadays, the value of art created is judged by how many people interact with it. The more likes, shares, and reposts your work gets, the better it is. This gets more and more people to come and become, less authentic with their work and flock towards favoring the algorithm rather than putting out pieces of actual art that have their soul embedded in it. It's why social media can be so boring sometimes, because we're constantly being fed the same thing. What works? We will never get anything new, anything experimental, anything personal, anything risky if we only rely on what's safe. I'm not saying I'm this unique breakout star that is so against the algorithm. I'm not. Even this video, Orb, is a very popular topic in the anime I'm not an anime YouTuber, but in the anime community. And despite how much I want it to, I don't expect this channel to pop off in any real capacity. Not just because of my less than stellar upload schedule, but because of the I don't know what I was saying, man. And relative inexperience in this field, but most especially how I physically can't make a video if I don't love the topic. But yeah, before I yap too much and make this script longer than it already is, because this script is very long, please, if you enjoyed the video, I know, YouTuber stuff, please subscribe, like the video, share with a friend, that kind of stuff. It promotes me in the algorithm and helps the channel do better. So yeah, thank you, and watch Orb and sleep well. Good night.